The Syrian desert wind carried sand like ground glass across the rooftop. Through the scope, everything shimmered in heat waves that turned distance into liquid mathematics. 1,180 meters to target. The ISIS commander stood in the courtyard below, radio pressed to his ear, coordinating attacks that would kill hundreds if he lived another hour. Angel 6, abort mission. The voice crackled sharp in Sarah Holden's earpiece. Sandstorm incoming. Visibility 0 in 90 seconds. I repeat, abort. She didn't move. Didn't respond. Her breathing had already slowed to the rhythm she'd trained 6 years to perfect. Heartbeat settling at 48 beats per minute. The world narrowed to Crosshair's target wind. Nothing else existed. Nothing else mattered. Her spotter lay 3 feet to her left. Beckett Coulter, 24 years old. Montana ranch kid who could read desert wind better than meteorologists with satellites. He didn't question her silence. Had seen her make shots that shouldn't exist in physics, textbooks much less reality. Wind shifted. 17 knots from the east. Temperature 114 Fahrenheit. Humidity 11%. Her mind calculated bullet drop wind drift Coriolis effect. At this latitude, the numbers became instinct, became absolute certainty. She exhaled halfway and held it. The world stopped breathing with her. The trigger broke clean. Sharp. Perfect. 2.9 seconds of flight time. The .50 caliber round crossed a quarter mile of superheated air threading through wind that would have pushed lesser shots 4 feet off target. Through the scope, she watched the ISIS commander's radio tumble from his hand. Watched him crumple like discarded paper. Watched his bodyguards scatter like startled birds searching for a threat they would never see. Target eliminated, Beck whispered. Voice tight with awe he'd never quite lost. Jesus Christ, Sarah. In this wind. That's impossible. Impossible is just math. Nobody bothered learning. She worked the bolt smooth and practiced already scanning for secondary threats. The sandstorm hit 30 seconds later. The world turned brown and howling. 0 visibility. Breathing became an act of faith. They extracted under conditions that grounded helicopters, Beck guiding her by touch through streets she'd memorized from satellite photographs 3 days prior. The team made the extraction point with 4 minutes to spare. That was August 2017. Raqqa, Syria. When Sarah Holden was still Sarah Holden. When Angel 6 was still just a call sign, not a legend that would force her into hiding. Not yet. The mission file would show objective completed, high-value target eliminated, 0 friendly casualties. Classified success. What it wouldn't show was that this was elimination number 189. That Sarah Holden at 24 years old had become the most lethal sniper the Marine Corps had ever produced. That 4 deployments across 6 years had turned a Montana girl who'd never fired a gun before boot camp into something the enemy whispered about in the dark. Angel 6. The ghost who killed from distances that made grown men check the sky for drones, for helicopters, for anything except the truth. That one woman with a rifle could reach out past half a mile and end you before the sound arrived. That night, after the extraction, after the debriefs, after the adrenaline settled into the particular exhaustion that combat veterans learned to wear like a second skin, Sarah and Beck sat on the roof of their barracks. The Syrian sky held more stars than Montana, which was saying something because Montana held more stars than most people believed existed. Beck talked about his horse, a bay gelding named Whiskey that he'd been riding since he was 12. The horse was 17 now. Getting old, getting stiff in the mornings, the way old horses did, but still willing, still game, still the best trail horse in Park County. When my enlistment's up, Beck said, I'm going home, riding Whiskey into the Absarokas, packing in for a week. Just me and that horse and the mountains, and not a single goddamn thing trying to kill us. Sarah smiled. When's that 8 months? 243 days. Not that I'm counting. You're counting. He grinned. That Montana grin that belonged on a face weathering decades of mountain seasons instead of Syrian combat rotations. Every single day. You should come, when this is over. Montana in September is the only place on Earth worth being. She thought about it. About Montana. About horses and mountains, and a life where the most dangerous thing was weather. About being somewhere that the skills she'd spent 6 years perfecting were unnecessary irrelevant, forgotten. Maybe she said, "If I remember how to be a person instead of a weapon." Beck looked at her. Serious now. The humor gone. "You were always a person, Sarah. The weapon part is just something you learned. The person part is who you are." She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that underneath the 189 confirmed kills and the steady hands and the heartbeat that dropped to 46 under fire, there was still a girl from Montana who didn't know how to shoot and had never wanted to learn. That was the last night they laughed together. 2 months later, October 2017. Different city, same war. Same heat that cooked rational thought out of your skull. The reconnaissance mission was supposed to be simple. 6 Marines. Rooftop observation post. 48 hours of watching, recording, reporting. No engagement unless compromised. By the book intelligence gathering. Hour 37. They were compromised. Sarah saw it first. Thermal signatures moving wrong. Too organized. Too deliberate. Converging on their building from 3 directions. Beck, we've got company. 30+ hostiles 3 minutes out. He keyed the radio. Called for extraction. Got static. Tried again. More static. Comms are jammed. His voice stayed level, but his eyes told the truth. They were alone. Surrounded. 30 enemy fighters against 6 Marines on a rooftop with limited ammunition and no support. "Get everyone to the north stairwell," Sarah said. "I'll buy time." Sarah. That's an order, Corporal. Move them now." She'd made staff sergeant 2 weeks prior. Still wasn't used to giving orders instead of taking them. But Beck moved. Got the other 4 Marines positioned for a fighting retreat while Sarah set up on the southern parapet. 400 meters to the nearest enemy position. Urban environment. Civilians still in the area. Restricted rules of engagement. She could only shoot confirmed combatants with visible weapons. She counted 12 qualifying targets in the first sweep. Started working through them. 1 shot, 1 kill reposition. Another shot, another kill. The mechanical rhythm of professional violence. The enemy adapted faster than expected. Returned suppressive fire. The rooftop became a storm of concrete chips and ricochets. Beck appeared beside her. "Everyone's at the stairwell. Extraction ETA 20 minutes. We need to move." "Negative. They've got the stairwell bracketed. We move now, we die in the funnel. We stay here, we die on this roof." He wasn't wrong. Her ammunition wouldn't last 20 minutes against 30 fighters who'd figured out her position. She made the call, the one that would change everything. "We jump." Beck stared. "What north side?" 3-story drop. "There's an alley. We jump, we run, we link up with the others, we extract." "Sarah, that's a 40-foot fall onto concrete." "I know. We'll shatter every bone in our legs." "Maybe. Or maybe we die here." "Definitely." She met his eyes. "Your call, brother. But I'm jumping in 30 seconds either way." He checked the drop. Checked the enemy advancing. Did the math she'd already done. "You're absolutely insane." He smiled, grim and ready. "Let's go." They ran to the north edge, vaulted the parapet. 3 stories of empty air. Sarah hit first. Tried to roll. Failed. Both legs buckled wrong. She heard bones snap. Felt pain like lightning through her entire nervous system. Collapsed, screaming. Beck landed beside her. Tumbled better. Got up. Reached for her. "Can you walk?" She tried. Her left leg bent at an angle. Legs shouldn't bend. She went down hard. Above them, enemy fighters appeared at the rooftop edge. Weapons raising. "Leave me," Sarah gasped. "Get to the others. Fuck that." Beck grabbed her, started dragging. The first burst of gunfire caught him across the back. Body armor stopped most of it. 1 round found the gap, punched through his lower spine. He went down, tried to get up. Couldn't. His legs weren't responding. "No." Sarah crawled to him. Both legs destroyed. Beck bleeding. Enemy fighters rappelling down the building. 30 seconds until they were overrun. Beck coughed blood. Looked at her with eyes going dim. His hand found hers. Squeezed. "You remember whiskey? My horse?" "Beck, don't tell my mom he likes apples. The green ones." She always gives him red and he just looks at her like she's lost her mind. He smiled. That Montana smile. One last time. Don't let me be the last one you couldn't save. Promise me, Angel. Promise. I promise. Beck. I swear. I promise. He died before she finished. 24 years old. Montana ranch kid who read Wind Like Poetry and loved a horse named Whiskey and died 3 feet from the woman he'd kept alive through 4 deployments because she wasn't fast enough to keep him alive through one alley. The enemy was 10 seconds out. Sarah had a sidearm, 15 rounds, 30 targets. She made 7 count, dropped 7 before the slide locked back empty, then waited for the end. It came as helicopter gunfire. The extraction team arriving late, weapons hot, turned the alley into hell for anyone not friendly. They pulled her out, pulled Beck's body out, pulled the other 4 Marines out alive. Mission rated as success. High casualty rate but acceptable losses. Acceptable. As if Beck was a number. As if his last words didn't haunt every breath she took afterward. Walter Reed Medical Center, Bethesda. 6 surgeries over 4 months. Compound fractures both tibias. Shattered left fibula. Severed ligaments. Nerve damage that made doctors shake their heads and talk about medical retirement in tones they reserved for delivering bad news to people who'd already received the worst news possible. Colonel Wyatt Hale visited on day 47. He'd trained her, believed in her, turned her from a Montana girl who couldn't hit targets past 200 meters into Angel 6. 68 years old and looked like he'd been carved from the same mountains they both called home. Navy Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart with 3 clusters. He sat beside her bed and told her truth she didn't want to hear. Chechen warlord named Karimov put 6 million on your head. Confirmed kill of his brother in Aleppo last year. Iranian intelligence added 4 million. You eliminated their top operative in Baghdad. There are 12 separate bounties from 8 countries. Total value exceeding $10 million for Angel 6. Dead. Proof required. Sarah stared at the ceiling. I'm done anyway. Legs are destroyed. Can't run. Can't deploy. I'm useless. You're alive. That's not useless. That's opportunity. For what? Hale leaned forward. To disappear. We stage a training accident. Closed casket funeral. Full honors. Angel 6 dies a hero. Sarah Holden gets buried with classified records sealed for 50 years. And you get a new name, a new identity, a new life where nobody's trying to collect $10 million for your corpse. Doing what I'm a sniper who can't walk. You're a combat medic who saved lives in 4 war zones. We retrain you. Nurse practitioner. Forward deployment medical support. You keep serving just differently. She thought about Beck. About his last words. About promises made in blood-soaked alleys that she intended to keep regardless of what it cost. If I do this, she said, if I become someone else, I want to save lives, not take them. No more killing. Just healing. Deal. They buried Sarah Holden in 2021. Arlington National Cemetery. Marine Honor Guard. 21 gun salute. The works. The coffin held sandbags and a dress uniform stuffed with newspaper. Sarah watched from a distance. Civilian clothes. Leaning on a cane she would need for the rest of her life. Or so everyone would believe. Marin Calloway was born that day. Same woman, different name. Permanent limp from injuries that had healed perfectly 3 months after the final surgery. 3 years of committed performance art playing broken so convincingly that orthopedic surgeons believed the lie when they examined x-rays she'd carefully doctored. 3 years of saving lives instead of ending them. 3 years of peace she'd fought harder for than any battle. 3 years until Montana changed everything. The CH-47 Chinook descended through air that wanted to kill everything inside it. -8 degrees Fahrenheit before wind chill, and the wind chill made that number a polite suggestion compared to reality. The rotors beat winter into temporary submission, carving a landing zone from snow that had been falling since before dawn. Since before anyone on board had slept, since before the world made sense. Inside the cargo bay, 18 Marines sat in jump seats wearing full combat loads and winter warfare gear. Their faces carried the particular tension of men heading somewhere they might not leave. Nobody joked. Nobody slept. The quiet that settled over professionals before potential violence had its own weight, its own gravity, and it pressed down on everyone equally. Everyone except the woman in the corner, who did not belong. Marin Calloway sat with her medical kit wedged between her boots and her left leg, extended at the awkward angle she had perfected through 3 years of obsessive practice. 31 years old, but looking older in the cargo bay's harsh fluorescent light. Angular features that winter made sharper like the mountains outside were already carving her face into something that matched the landscape. Pale gray eyes that reflected light without returning warmth. Hair pulled back tight enough to hurt, tight enough to remind her that this was real. This was the life she had chosen over the one that chose her first. The Marines pretended not to stare. Most failed. They sent us a nurse, Private Tanner Briggs whispered to the man beside him, 22 years old and hadn't learned that sound carried differently inside a helicopter's metal belly. Every word found ears whether you intended them to or not. Look at her leg. She can barely walk. What's she going to do if we take contact limp at the enemy? Low laughter from 2 seats down. Someone shushed it. The kind of cruel humor that young men used to manage fear they couldn't name. Marin didn't react. She had learned not to. Learned to make herself small, forgettable beneath notice. Learned to limp so convincingly that even orthopedic surgeons believed the injury was real when they examined x-rays she had carefully doctored 3 years prior. 3 years of playing broken. 3 years of being invisible. The skills that made her Angel 6 hadn't disappeared. They just found different applications. She watched snow streak past the porthole and thought about Beckett Coulter, about Montana Wind, about a ranch kid who read weather like poetry and died at 24 with a smile on his face because she had promised him something she intended to keep. Don't let me be the last one you couldn't save. She wouldn't. Whatever happened on this mountain, whoever these 18 men were, she would bring them home. That was the promise. That was the only thing that mattered. The helicopter touched down hard. Snow erupted in blinding clouds that swallowed the ramp before it finished dropping. Cold rushed in like a physical assault, like the mountain itself was reaching inside to test who deserved to be here and who would break first. Move, move, move. The loadmaster's voice cut through rotor wash like a blade through cloth. Marines flowed out in practice formation boots, hitting frozen ground with the particular crunch of men who had trained for this exact scenario and still weren't ready for how real it felt. Marin stood slowly, favoring her left leg, gripping the overhead rail for support that was entirely theatrical. She had spent 3 years making this performance seamless. The hesitation before weight transfer, the slight grimace at impact, the careful redistribution of balance that suggested chronic nerve damage without overplaying into obvious sympathy-seeking. She made it 3 steps before Sergeant Dalton Graves brushed past. Impatient with her slowness, not cruel about it, just a man who moved at combat speed and couldn't afford to wait for anyone who didn't. She stumbled deliberately, caught herself, limped down the ramp into the worst cold she had felt since the lie began. The forward operating base barely deserved the designation. Prefabricated structures half buried in snowdrift. Fighting positions dug into frozen earth that resisted entrenching tools like concrete-resisting fingernails. Camouflage netting strung between scraggly pines that looked dead even when they weren't. The kind of place that didn't appear on maps politicians reviewed during appropriations hearings. The kind of place men died without headlines. Captain Landry Mercer stood near the command tent, watching his unit assemble with the eyes of a man who counted bodies the way accountants counted columns. 42 years old. Career infantry. A face like weathered granite that had been rained on by 3 different wars. He had led men through Fallujah and Helmand, and a dozen places that taught you one fundamental truth. The only people who could be trusted when the lights went out were the ones who had proven it when the lights went out. His gaze found Marin and stayed there. Not with appreciation, not with interest, with the cold calculation of a man adding weight to a scale that was already tipping the wrong direction. She limped toward him through ankle-deep powder medical kit, heavy on her shoulder, making sure every step broadcast weakness, vulnerability, limitation. Exactly what they expected to see. Exactly what she needed them to believe. Captain Mercer, Nurse Practitioner Calloway, reporting as assigned. Sir. He didn't salute. This wasn't that kind of operation. Just studied her like a problem he hadn't solved yet and didn't particularly want to encounter in the first place. You're the medical support they sent. Not a question. An accusation wearing a question's clothing. Yes, sir. That leg. Combat injury. Marin had the story memorized. Had told it 61 times without variation, without hesitation, without the micro-expressions that trained interrogators looked for when they suspected deception. Training accident, sir. Compound fracture with extensive nerve damage. Retrained as medical personnel afterward. Can you run? No, sir. Can you carry a combat load over distance? No, sir. Then what exactly can you do for me out here, Calloway? Each word precise. Clipped. The voice of a man who had lost soldiers because of weak links and chains that should have held. She met his eyes. Kept her voice level, professional, emptied of the pride that would have answered differently if she were someone else. If she were who she used to be. Keep your Marines alive, sir. That's what I do. That's all I do. Mercer's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter that wouldn't dissolve. He turned to the sergeant standing nearby. Graves, get her set up in the medical bunker. When contact initiates, and it will, she stays there. Understood? We cannot spare combat personnel protecting someone who can't keep pace. Sergeant Dalton Graves was 38 years old with scar tissue, where his left ear should have been a souvenir from Helmand Province that he never explained, and nobody asked about twice. The kind of non-commissioned officer who had seen enough combat to know what mattered, and what was just noise. He gestured for Marin to follow. His voice dropped when they were out of Mercer's earshot, not conspiratorial, just the natural register of a man who didn't waste volume on conversations that didn't require it. Don't take it personal, ma'am. Captain's thinking tactically. Bodies that can't move are liabilities in mobile warfare. Nothing against you specifically. I understand completely, Sergeant. That leg, Afghanistan training stateside, actually, he grunted. Didn't believe her, but didn't care enough to press. Led her to a reinforced dugout near the command post. Sandbags stacked shoulder-high timber supports that smelled like green pine and old fear. Barely room for 3 people, and the medical supplies already stacked inside. The bunker carried the particular cold that seeped into places the sun never reached. The kind of cold that lived in the ground itself and waited for warmth to steal. This is you. During any engagement, you stay here. Captain's orders. Direct and non-negotiable. Marin nodded, set down her kit, took in the space with eyes that calculated fields of fire escape routes. Structural integrity. The timber would stop small arms, but nothing heavier. The entrance faced west away from the most likely approach vectors. One exit only. Habits that never died. They just learned to hide better than the person carrying them. Graves started to leave, paused at the canvas entrance. Something in his posture shifted from professional obligation to genuine curiosity. You really think you can keep people alive out here, this far from surgical support? In this cold, she looked at him. Let something true show in her eyes for just a fraction of a second. A glimpse of who lived underneath the performance, underneath the limp, underneath 3 years of careful erasure. I've kept people alive in worse places, Sergeant. Under worse conditions. With less equipment. I'll manage. He studied her. Something in his expression shifted. Not understanding, not recognition. Just the awareness that still water sometimes ran very deep, and that this particular pond might not have a visible bottom. Then he was gone, and Marin was alone in the bunker with 18 Marines outside who thought she was useless and a false bottom in her medical kit that said otherwise. She unpacked her medical supplies with practiced efficiency, organizing by triage priority. Morphine ampules, pressure bandages, surgical clamps, hemostatic agents, quick clot combat gauze, chest seals, needle decompression kits. The tools of her chosen trade, saving instead of ending, building instead of destroying. But beneath everything in the compartment, she had built herself during a weekend in her apartment with woodworking tools and an engineer's precision hidden by a false bottom that would fool any standard inspection, any casual search, any X-ray machine operated by someone who wasn't specifically looking for what she had hidden. Lay the pieces of who she used to be. A Macmillan TAC-50. Disassembled. Each component wrapped in treated cloth that prevented metal-on-metal contact and the rust that followed. The rifle had traveled with her through 4 deployments in 7 countries and 189 confirmed eliminations. It had been hidden for 3 years inside medical equipment scanned by security personnel who never looked deep enough, never asked the right questions. Never imagined that a limping nurse practitioner might be carrying the most lethal sniper rifle ever fielded by the United States Marine Corps. You didn't stop being what you were. You just got better at pretending you had forgotten. She didn't touch the components. Not yet. Maybe not ever if luck held. If circumstances stayed simple. If promises made to dead men didn't come due in frozen mountains that didn't care about promises or the people who made them. Outside snow began to fall. Thick, heavy, the kind that buried the world in white silence and made you forget that anything existed beyond the next footstep. She moved through the Marine positions in the late afternoon, checking individual first aid kits, learning faces, memorizing names. Building the human connections that would make triage decisions easier when she had 3 critical patients and resources for 2. Not because anyone asked her to, because it was what medical personnel did. Because being present built trust. Because when the shooting started, these men needed to know she was competent even if they thought she was useless in a firefight. Corporal Rowan Pace sat in his fighting position at the eastern perimeter. 24 years old Montana, born the kind of hard-edged young man these mountains produced like stones from a riverbed. Quiet confidence worn like a second skin. He was checking his M4 for the 3rd time, breath clouding white in the failing light, when Marin approached. "Mind if I check your individual trauma kit, Corporal?" He glanced up, shrugged with the casual indifference of someone who believed in his own preparation. "Sure, ma'am, but I know my medical gear. Been through it twice already today." She knelt beside him, awkward with the theatrical limp, and opened his IFAK. It was well organized. He had been trained properly. But she repacked it anyway, adjusting placement so items would be accessible with cold-numbed fingers wearing thick gloves, making sure the tourniquet would deploy one-handed in the dark without fumbling. "You've been deployed before," she said conversationally, reading him, building rapport. "Iraq. 2 rotations. Ramadi and Fallujah. Training accidents don't earn deployment ribbons, ma'am," he added, glancing at her leg. The lie came easy now, automatic as breathing. She didn't even have to think about the words. They just arrived polished and credible, fitted to the moment like a key to a lock. No, they don't." He nodded, didn't push. But he watched her hands as she finished repacking, noticed the efficiency, the way her fingers never fumbled, never hesitated, never second-guessed a single movement. The kind of muscle memory that came from doing something 1,000 times under stress that had nothing to do with classrooms or simulations. "That's good work, ma'am. You move like you've done trauma care under fire before." "Real fire. Trained extensively in simulation," she said, handing back his kit. "Try very hard not to need it tonight. That's always the plan." He smiled. Young and confident and immortal in the way only men who hadn't been seriously hurt yet could afford to be. "Never works out that way, though, does it?" "Sometimes it does. Sometimes you get lucky." She stood wincing as her supposedly damaged leg took weight. The leg that worked perfectly. The leg she had spent 3 years pretending was crippled. "Make tonight one of the lucky times, Pace." "Yes, ma'am." At the northern perimeter, she found Private Corbin Marsh, 22 years old, the youngest Marine in the unit by 8 months, though he carried himself like someone who had lived longer than his birth certificate suggested. He was looking at his phone at a photograph that made him smile and hurt, at the same time the way photographs of people you loved always did when you were far away and the distance felt permanent. "Family?" Marin asked. He showed her without hesitation. The trust of someone who needed to share or crack under the weight of carrying it alone. A newborn baby, 3 weeks old. Impossibly small. Impossibly perfect. The kind of photograph that made you believe the world was worth the trouble of defending it. "Marin Elizabeth Marsh," he said. "Born January 2nd. I haven't met her yet. Haven't held her." Something cracked in Marin's chest. The coincidence of the name hit like a physical blow she hadn't braced for. This boy had named his daughter after the fiction she wore like armor, after the lies she had built to survive. The universe folding irony into origami that cut when you touched it. "She's beautiful," Marin said. "Meaning it. You'll hold her soon. You think..." He looked at her. Really looked, searching for reassurance from someone who might know something he didn't. Might see something beyond the snow and the cold and the isolation that pressed in from every direction. "We're pretty far out here. Pretty isolated. If something happens, you'll go home to her, Marsh. I promise you that." He wanted to believe. She could see it in the way his shoulders shifted, in the way his grip on the phone tightened, like holding it harder would make the photograph more real, would close the distance between this frozen mountain and a hospital room where his daughter slept without knowing her father was somewhere cold and dangerous and afraid. How can you promise something like that, ma'am? Because I'm Angel 6 and I have never broken a promise to someone I swore to protect. Because I will kill every single person between you and home if that is what it takes. Because your daughter deserves a father, and I have the skills to make sure she gets one. Because that's what medics do, she said instead. We keep promises. We bring people home. That's the job. He nodded, reassured by words he desperately needed to believe spoken by a woman he thought was just a nurse with a bad leg and a bedside manner better than the situation deserved. He put his phone away, checked his weapon, got ready for a night that might never let him hold his daughter. Marin limped away carrying weight she could not share, knowing that if things went wrong, if circumstances forced her hand, she would break every rule and every cover and every carefully constructed lie to keep that promise. Beck's last words echoed through the cold, through the years, through the distance between who she was and who she pretended to be. Don't let me be the last one you couldn't save. She wouldn't. Whatever the cost, whatever it took. Corbin Marsh would hold his daughter. The second Chinook arrived 90 minutes after the first. Marin heard it before she saw it. That distinctive beat of tandem rotors that announced something important incoming. Something unscheduled. Something that changed the equation of whatever was happening on this mountain. She emerged from the bunker limping through ankle-deep powder and watched it land with the attention of someone who had learned to read situations through their smallest details. The way the crew chief moved, the way the loadmaster positioned himself, the particular urgency that separated routine from significant. One man stepped off. Just one. That alone told you everything you needed to know about who he was and why he was here. Colonel Wyatt Hale was 68 years old and looked like he had been carved from the same granite that formed the mountains surrounding them. Tall, straight-backed despite the years that should have bent him. Eyes that had watched the world burn in 3 different wars and still found reasons to stand in front of the fire. He wore a parka that barely contained the service ribbons underneath, though Marin knew each one by memory. Navy Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart with 3 clusters, Bronze Star with Valor device. He had earned all of them before most of these Marines were born. Captain Mercer moved to greet him, clearly caught off guard by the unannounced arrival of Senior Brass at a forward position that wasn't supposed to matter enough for Senior Brass to visit. Colonel Hale, sir. We weren't informed you'd be joining this operation. Readiness inspection, Captain. I'm here to observe your unit's performance in adverse environmental conditions. His voice carried the rasp of a man who had breathed too much smoke and swallowed too much sand and shouted too many orders that saved lives while ending others. This is still classified as a training exercise, correct? Yes, sir. Readiness evaluation. Defensive position, sustainment, and cold weather combat protocols. Outstanding. Carry on as if I'm not here. But his eyes had already found Marin. Standing near the medical bunker in the falling snow, leaning on her cane, watching him with gray eyes that held 3 years of silence and secrets and the particular loneliness of being dead while still breathing. For a fraction of a second, something passed between them. Recognition, acknowledgement, the silent communication that existed only between people who shared history that could never be spoken aloud, who had stood together in places that did not appear on any map, who had done things that never happened, and buried truths that would never surface. Then it was gone. Professional distance reimposed like a wall rebuilt in an instant. The night fell on that mountain like a door slamming shut on hope. Temperature dropped to -21 degrees. The kind of cold where breath froze in beards before it finished, leaving mouths, where rifle actions got sluggish and unreliable, where exposed skin turned black in minutes, where the world became actively hostile to human life and made no secret of its hostility. Shouting outside the bunker. Then boots in snow moving fast, panic-driven. The particular rhythm of men carrying something heavy and urgent. Marin grabbed her medical kit and limped out into the freezing night. Her breath crystallized, instantly hanging in the air like small ghosts before the wind tore them apart. 2 Marines were carrying Corporal Rowan Pace. Even in the darkness, she could see blood. Lots of it, black against white snow. A trail of it leading back toward the eastern perimeter like a terrible road map of what had happened. What happened? She was already moving fast as her fake limp allowed, which was not fast enough and never would be. Patrol hit a tripwire, one of the carriers reported. voice tight with controlled panic. IED or mine. Pace took the worst of it. They brought him into the medical bunker. Laid him on the tarp she had prepared for exactly this scenario because you always prepared for the worst and hoped you were wasting your time. Marin activated chemical lights. The bunker filled with sickly green glow that turned blood black and skin the color of old paper. Pace's left side was shredded. Dozens of metal fragments had punched through winter gear through the gaps in body armor into flesh that was never designed to stop shrapnel traveling at supersonic velocities. Blood everywhere. His breathing rapid and shallow and getting worse. Shock setting in fast, the body's panicked response to damage it couldn't comprehend. "Get me trauma shears," Marin said. Her voice had changed. No hesitation, no uncertainty, no performance. Pure clinical authority that came from treating gunshot wounds in Syrian alleys and blast injuries in Iraqi cities and sucking chest wounds in Afghan mountains where dust turned surgery into an act of faith. The Marine scrambled to help, handing her instruments holding flashlights, doing what she directed without questioning, because her voice carried the kind of command that existed beyond rank. The command of absolute competence. She cut away his gear layer by layer. Jacket, vest, shirt, exposing the damage to chemical light that made everything look worse than it was, which was saying something because it was already terrible. Arterial bleed from the femoral. Blood pulsing in rhythmic spurts that meant a major vessel was compromised. Punctured lung, probably from shrapnel that had traveled through the body cavity. Fragments still embedded in a dozen places that would need extraction she couldn't perform here. In a hospital, this would require a surgical team, an operating room, anesthesia. Hours of careful work under controlled conditions with monitoring equipment and blood products and specialists standing by. Here she had basic supplies and her hands. Her very steady hands that remembered how to work miracles when miracles were all that stood between a young man and a flag-draped coffin. She worked for 40 minutes. No wasted motion, no excess communication. When she needed an instrument, she held out her hand, and it appeared because the Marines around her had figured out that this woman knew exactly what she was doing, and their only job was to keep up. Clamp the arterial bleed with hemostatic forceps that she positioned by feel, because the chemical light wasn't bright enough for precision, and precision was happening anyway. Packed the worst wounds with quick-clot combat gauze, pressing it deep into tissue that bled like the body was trying to empty itself. Inserted a chest tube when his breathing deteriorated, the sucking sound of a compromised lung cavity filling the bunker like a third person gasping. Working by feel and experience because textbooks didn't prepare you for this. Nothing prepared you for this except doing it and surviving and doing it again. Outside the bunker, Captain Mercer watched through the canvas opening. Beside him, Colonel Hale stood with his arms crossed and his face carefully empty of everything except professional interest. "She's good," Mercer said quietly, surprised despite himself. "Better than good," Hale replied. No surprise in his voice at all. "She's exceptional. Trust me on this, Captain. Still can't fight, though. Can't move under fire." Hale glanced at him. Something flickered behind his eyes that might have been amusement if the situation weren't so serious. "Can't she?" But Mercer had already turned away, moving to coordinate response to the IED that someone had placed, which meant someone hostile was out there, which meant this training operation had become something else entirely. Inside the bunker, Marin tied off the last suture. Pace was stable, alive. His breathing had improved. His pulse had steadied. He would need evacuation within 48 hours, but he would live. He would see Montana again. She sat back on her heels. Her hands were covered in blood. Her jacket soaked with it. But her hands did not shake, did not tremble. Steady as they had been in Raqqa, in Helmand, in Fallujah, because some skills never faded. You just learned to use them for different purposes. Behind her, she heard someone whisper, "Jesus Christ." She just saved his life. Did you see that? That was surgical level work. Another voice quieter. "Still can't run though. Still dead weight if we get hit hard." Marin didn't respond. Just cleaned her instruments. Checked Pace's vitals. But her mind was working a different problem now. IED meant enemy presence. Professional placement meant training resources intent. This wasn't random. This was someone testing defenses before the main assault. She had seen this pattern before. Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq. The probe before the storm. The test before the killing blow. This wasn't training anymore. Maybe never had been. Hale appeared at the bunker entrance like something the storm had produced. Didn't announce himself. Just materialized from snow and darkness the way old soldiers learned to move when they had spent more years in hostile territory than in any place that could be called home. Marin was checking Pace's IV line when she felt his presence. Looked up, met his eyes in the chemical light that made everyone look like ghosts of themselves. Marin. His voice was low, meant only for her. She didn't respond immediately. Finished adjusting the IV drip. Made sure Pace was sleeping, and not just unconscious because the difference mattered, and she had learned to tell them apart by watching the muscles around the eyes. Why are you here, Wyatt? First names. No rank. The language of people who had known each other long enough and deeply enough that formality was just another kind of lie. They're coming. He moved into the bunker, crouched beside her so their conversation wouldn't carry beyond the canvas walls. JSOC intercepted communications 12 hours ago. Russian Spetsnaz. 72 operators. This base was designed as bait. Command suspected cross-border incursion for months. They needed them to commit to something actionable, something that could be documented and used diplomatically. These Marines don't know. Captain Mercer knows now. I briefed him 20 minutes ago while you were working on Pace. He's adjusting defensive preparations, but there's only so much you can do with 18 men against 72 professionals who know exactly where you are. QRF weathered in at Joint Base Lewis McChord. Storm's too severe for flight operations. 6 hours minimum before they can launch. Maybe 8 depending on how this system develops. Marin looked at Pace sleeping on the tarp, at the blood on her hands, at the bunker that was supposed to be her hiding place, her sanctuary, the box where the crippled nurse would cower while real soldiers did real fighting. 18 Marines against 72 Spetsnaz. She did the math. The terrible, simple math that reduced human lives to arithmetic. The numbers don't work, Wyatt. Not even close. No, they don't. He reached into his parka and pulled out a device she recognized immediately. Small, black. 3 buttons. The JSOC emergency beacon. The one that would bring hell from above if activated. The one that would reach NORAD in 90 seconds and scramble every available asset, regardless of weather or distance or political considerations. The one that would also confirm to anyone monitoring the frequencies that mattered that Angel 6 was alive and operational. You came here to protect my cover, Marin said. To make sure I didn't have to break it. I came here because I knew what was coming. Knew you'd have to choose between the life you built and the men who need saving. He held out the beacon. She looked at it, but didn't take it. Not yet. If I activate this, if I break cover, there's no going back. Every enemy I ever made finds out I'm alive. The Chechens, the Iranians, everyone who's been hunting Angel 6 for 3 years. Yes. The peaceful life ends. Permanently. Yes. Silence. Just the wind outside and Pace's breathing and the weight of a choice that couldn't be taken back once it was made. You don't have to, Hale said. You can stay in this bunker. Let them fight it out. Survive as medical support. No one would blame you. Your obligation ended 3 years ago when they buried you. 18 men will die, Wyatt. 18 fathers and sons and husbands who thought they were training for contingencies, who trusted their government wouldn't use them as bait and leave them to die when the trap sprung. They're Marines. They understood the risks when they signed. Like Beck understood the risks. Her voice went cold, hard. The temperature of memory that never warmed regardless of how many years passed. Like the 6 men who went home in boxes from Syria because I was too broken to save them. Hale's face tightened, old pain surfacing through the professional mask he wore as naturally as his uniform. Syria wasn't your fault. You did everything possible. Doesn't matter if it was my fault. They're still dead. Beck's still dead. And I promised him. I promised. She took the beacon, felt its weight, light as a grenade, heavy as the choice it represented, heavy as 3 years of careful hiding and harder truths about to collapse into a single irreversible moment. How long until they hit us? Hour? Maybe 90 minutes. They're using the storm, moving slow to avoid detection until they're in assault range. Get somewhere safe, Colonel. You've done enough. He put his hand on her shoulder, squeezed once, the gesture of a man who had sent people into harm's way more times than he could count, and never stopped feeling the weight of it. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. The weapon I trained became a healer. That's rare. That matters more than you know. Then he was gone. Back into the storm. Back to wherever old warriors went when young ones prepared for choices that would define everything that came after. Midnight had come and gone. The temperature bottomed out at -22. The storm arrived on schedule, punctual as death, as if the weather itself had been briefed on the operation's timeline. Snow fell in thick curtains that reduced visibility to 30 feet. The world became white noise and darkness. At 0147, the surveillance drone died. Marin heard the alert from her bunker. Listened to the radio chatter with ears that understood the words and everything they weren't saying. Lost feed on Raven 2. Complete signal loss. No degradation, just dark. Technical failure. Negative, sir. Battery was at 73%. This is signal kill. Electronic warfare. They're here. The command net went quiet. The specific silence of 18 men realizing simultaneously that training had ended and survival had begun. Captain Mercer's voice came back stripped of every pretense, all positions weapons free on confirmed hostile targets. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Then directed at the medical bunker at the nurse he had dismissed. At the woman he thought was useless Calloway, when shooting starts, you stay in that bunker. You hide. That is a direct order. Do not come out for any reason. Go hide. Marin stood alone in the bunker, chemical light casting green shadows on sandbag walls. Pace unconscious on the tarp, the storm howling outside like something alive and angry. 18 Marines in fighting positions against 72 Spetsnaz operators who were professional and equipped, enclosing through the darkness like a noose tightening around a throat. She thought about Corbin Marsh, about his daughter 3 weeks old who had never felt her father's hands, about the promise she had made with the same certainty she used to make shots that physics said were impossible. She thought about Beck, about Montana wind and a horse named Whiskey, and a smile that lasted longer than the life it belonged to. She opened her medical kit, found the false bottom, pressed the hidden release that required knowing exactly where and exactly how hard to push. A mechanism she had designed and built herself because trusting someone else with this secret was trusting someone else with her life. And she had learned in Syria what happened when you depended on people who weren't there when it mattered. The Macmillan TAC-50 lay in pieces, waiting, patient as the mountains outside. A tool doesn't judge its user. It just stays ready for purpose. Her hands moved without conscious thought. Muscle memory from 1,000 repetitions in dark rooms and bright deserts and every condition between. Barrel, receiver, scope, stock, bolt assembly, magazine well. 28 seconds from components to weapon. She could do it blindfolded. Had done it in darker places than this. She loaded 15 rounds, .50 BMG, custom loads with hand-selected brass and powder charges calculated for extreme cold. Every round perfect, because anything less than perfect meant someone died who shouldn't. Then she set down the cane she had leaned on for 3 years, straightened her left leg, the leg that had never been broken, the leg that was perfect muscular, fully functional, the limp that had been theater. 3 years of committed performance. The most important role she had ever played. She flexed the leg, full range of motion, no pain, no limitation, never had been. Marin Calloway was the lie she had told so convincingly she had almost believed it herself. Sarah Holden had always been real, had just been sleeping, waiting, patient. She activated the JSOC beacon. 3 clicks. Emergency authentication. NORAD would receive it in 90 seconds. QRF would scramble immediately. 6 hours minimum through the storm. These Marines did not have 6 hours. They had maybe 60 minutes before contact, maybe 30 minutes of fighting before they were overrun. But they had something the enemy had not accounted for, could not have accounted for, would not believe was possible even after it happened. They had Angel 6. She pulled on white winter camouflage, loaded extra magazines into pockets that had been designed for bandages and now carried death instead of healing. Checked the scope one final time, then stopped. Looked at the medical supplies around her, at the bandages and morphine and all the tools she had used to save lives instead of ending them, at the person she had tried so hard to become. "I'm sorry," she whispered. To no one, to everyone, to the ghost of who she had been, and the person she had hoped to stay. She picked up the rifle and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit like a fist. Wind screaming. Snow horizontal. Visibility maybe 40 feet in the chemical light scatter from base positions. Temperature -24. Cold enough to kill in minutes without proper gear. Cold enough to make metal brittle. Cold enough to change everything about how bullets behaved in flight. She moved through the Marine positions using terrain and darkness. None of them saw her. Too focused on the threat in front. Too convinced the crippled nurse was safe in her bunker where she belonged, where they had told her to hide. She found high ground. Barely 4 feet of elevation on a slight ridge to the south. But in flat terrain, 4 feet was everything. The difference between seeing over obstacles and shooting into them. She went prone in the snow. The cold soaked through her white camouflage instantly started the countdown to hypothermia that would become the second enemy she'd fight tonight. Through the scope, the world became green and thermal, heat signatures blooming against the frozen landscape like flowers made of murder. And there, 740 meters, a cluster of shapes, organized, moving with purpose, professional spacing, tactical discipline. The enemy had arrived. 72 operators who thought they were hitting an unprepared training unit in a blizzard, who thought this would be quick and clean and deniable, who thought the hardest part would be the cold. At the formation's center, one figure stood apart. Radio antenna visible through the thermal haze, 4 bodyguards in close protection, textbook command element positioning. Kill the head and the body dies. Basic principle of decapitation strikes old as warfare itself. Sarah calculated. Wind 19 knots gusting to 26. Temperature -24. Snow reducing effective range. Bullet would drift right. Drop significant at this distance. Cold air slowing powder burn by a measurable percentage that mattered when the margin between hit and miss was measured in inches. 3.5 mils right for wind. 8.3 mils elevation for distance and drop. Temperature correction -0.4. The numbers became instinct, became certainty. Became the quiet mathematics of a woman who had stopped counting kills at 150 and only started again when someone else kept the records. She exhaled halfway. Let her heart rate settle to 46. Became still in the way only a true predator could, not just motionless. Absent. A ghost in the snow. The trigger broke clean. 2.4 seconds of flight time. The bullet crossed 740 meters of storm-wrecked mountain air, threading through wind, compensating for cold, arriving before sound, before warning, before the commander's bodyguards could understand that the universe had just changed. Through the scope, she watched him fall, watched his radio tumble into the snow, watched 4 bodyguards scatter like birds flushed from cover, searching for a threat they would never see because it was firing from a distance and through conditions that made shooting a theoretical exercise for anyone who wasn't her. She worked the bolt, smooth, fast, brass ejecting into snow she would never find it in. Already acquiring the next target. Second in command, 695 meters moving between vehicles. She fired. He dropped. Third target. Radio operator. 720 meters. Cut their communications. She fired. He fell across the radio equipment and didn't move. Fourth. PKM machine gunner, setting up his weapon at 510 meters. If that gun spoke, Marines would die. She fired. The machine gun never fired. The gunner slumped over the barrel. Below her, confusion spreading through the Marine positions like ripples from a stone. Men shouting, trying to locate the source of shots that seemed to come from the storm itself. Where the hell is that coming from? Mercer's voice. Somebody give me a location. Nobody could. Nobody would. Angel 6 was a ghost, and ghosts didn't follow the rules of the living. She repositioned. 40 meters east. Shallow depression. Never shoot twice from the same location. Fifth target. Mortar team spotter adjusting for wind. 665 meters. Fired. Down. Sixth. A replacement officer trying to rally troops at 780 meters, partially hidden by a disabled vehicle. She waited. 3 seconds. 5. Patience was 90% of sniping. He moved into a gap, exposed himself for 3 seconds, trying to direct fire. She fired. He didn't move again. 8 minutes, 6 kills. 6 pieces of Russian command structure eliminated. Their assault stalling. Breaking apart. Professional soldiers without leadership becoming just scared men in the dark. Then a bullet cracked past her head. 5 inches right. Supersonic snap that meant someone had found her. Someone good. Counter sniper. Spetsnaz fielded them because you didn't walk into American operations without someone trained to hunt the hunters. She rolled left on instinct. Snow erupted where she had been prone. Second shot. Closer. Whoever this was could track her movement, read her displacement pattern. She calculated his position from bullet trajectory. Northeast ridge. 880 meters. Elevated. Thermal scope good enough to find her heat signature through the blizzard. This was different now. Predator versus predator. Professional versus professional. She did what no rational person would do. Went flat. Pulled snow over her body and rifle. Became terrain. Then crawled. Not away from the threat. Toward it. 90 meters through powder to the frozen creek bed she had noted during her afternoon walk through the perimeter. The walk everyone thought was just a nurse checking first aid kits. She slid into the ice water. The cold was instant. Shocking. The kind that stops breath and stutters hearts. -24 air was survivable. -24 ice water was something else entirely. Her thermal signature would vanish completely. The enemy sniper would see nothing but frozen landscape. She counted to 30 while her body screamed. Muscles cramping. Vision narrowing. Counted to 60 while consciousness began to gray at the edges. Counted to 90 while something inside her that wasn't physical, that lived beyond the reach of temperature, kept her moving. She crawled 200 meters downstream. Underwater. No breathing, just movement and will, and the promise to Corbin Marsh, and the memory of Beckett Coulter, and the understanding that some things mattered more than survival. Surfaced behind the enemy sniper's position. Gasped for air. Body convulsing. Hypothermia transitioning from risk to certainty. Maybe 20 minutes before it became critical. Maybe 40 before it killed her. But she had position. And position was everything. The enemy sniper was still scanning her old location with professional patience. Good at his job. Well-trained. Disciplined. Not good enough. 920 meters now. Uphill. 6-degree angle. Wind gusting between 20 and 30 knots. Her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the rifle steady. Vision blurring. Core temperature critically low. She wedged the rifle against a rock outcropping. Couldn't trust her hands. Breathed on the scope to clear condensation. Waited for her body to stop shaking long enough to aim. The wind dropped. 3-second window. She fired on instinct more than calculation. The rifle bucked. She barely felt it through the cold and adrenaline and the edge of consciousness. 3.6 seconds later, through the scope, the enemy sniper slumped over his rifle. 6 rounds remaining. She forced herself to move. Epinephrine auto-injector slammed into her thigh. Heart rate spiked. Vision cleared enough. Muscle control returned just enough to matter. 4 more targets. 4 more impossible shots. Reserve squad leader at 685 meters. Officer coordinating vehicle extraction at 755. Anti-tank team leader at 710. Final officer establishing rear guard at 730. 4 shots. 4 kills. 12 rounds fired. 12 Russian command elements eliminated. The assault force dissolving into men without direction, vehicles grinding away through snow, soldiers on foot scattering into darkness. Angel 6 had returned. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. Hypothermia had progressed too far. Core temperature plummeting. Motor control compromised. This was how people died in mountains. Not from bullets. From cold that crept in while you were focused on saving everyone else. She forced herself toward the bunker. 50 meters. 40. 30. Her vision graying. Legs failing. 20 meters. Crawling now. Dragging herself through powder. The rifle components scattered in her pockets had to stay hidden. The lie had to hold. 10 meters. She could hear voices. Marines calling out, searching for casualties, alive with the particular energy of men who had survived something they shouldn't have. 5 meters. She collapsed against the bunker entrance, used the last of her strength to arrange herself, made sure her left leg was positioned at the angle that showed the limp, made sure nothing looked wrong except the hypothermia that was very, very real. Then let the cold take her. Let the shaking consume her. Let darkness creep in. Sergeant Graves found her 30 seconds later. Jesus Christ, Calloway, what are you doing out here? She couldn't answer, teeth chattering too violently, body convulsing with shivers that were not performance. This was real hypothermia, real danger, real chance she would die from cold after surviving everything else. He grabbed her, started dragging her inside, shouting for help. Mercer appeared. Then Hale, his voice controlled and professional, but his eyes meeting hers for 1 second of understanding that said everything words could not. She's got maybe 20 minutes before this becomes irreversible. Warming blankets, hot fluids. Now. They wrapped her in thermal blankets. Forced warm water between lips that chattered against the rim. Through the shivers, she managed words that came out broken and small, and exactly what a terrified nurse would say. The shooting. So much shooting. I was so scared. You stayed in the bunker like ordered, Mercer asked, searching her face. She nodded, couldn't speak more. But Graves was looking at her jacket, at ice crystals that formed a particular pattern he recognized because he had grown up in these mountains and knew what creek ice looked like on fabric. Knew the difference between snowmelt and submersion. Knew that this woman had been in water recently within the last hour, in conditions where being in water meant dying, or being something more than anyone had imagined. Captain, he said quietly. Her jacket. That's creek ice formation. I grew up in Montana. I know what that looks like. Hale stepped in smoothly. The practiced intervention of a man who had been managing secrets longer than most of these Marines had been alive. She probably tried to help someone. Saw a Marine down, tried to reach them, got disoriented in the storm, fell in the frozen creek. Lucky she made it back at all. It was a good lie. Better than Marin could have managed through the hypothermia. Mercer wanted to push. She could see it in the set of his jaw, in the questions forming behind his eyes. But the radios were exploding with QRF communications, helicopters overhead. The cavalry arriving late to a battle that had already been won by a ghost. Stay with her, Mercer ordered Graves. Make sure she doesn't die of exposure. We'll discuss this later. He left. Graves lingered for one more moment, looking at her with eyes that saw too much and understood more than he would ever say aloud. Then he was gone too. Only Hale remained. The rifle, he whispered. She patted her jacket. The components were there, hidden, safe. How many? She held up both hands, showed 12 fingers through shaking that was not entirely from cold. Christ, Sarah. 12 kills in these conditions. He closed his eyes briefly, opened them. You just made yourself real again. The Russians will know by morning. Everyone will know Angel 6 is alive. Marin. She whispered through chattering teeth. I'm Marin. Not anymore. Not after tonight. Through the bunker opening, she could see helicopters landing, Marines being loaded, the mountains shaking with rotor wash and shouted orders and the controlled chaos of extraction. And somewhere in the noise, she heard Corbin Marsh's voice. Alive. Calling for his squad leader. Looking for his brothers. Making sure everyone was accounted for. She closed her eyes. He was alive. They were all alive. 15 walking, 3 dead from the initial contact. 9 wounded. But 15 Marines would go home. Corbin Marsh would hold his 3-week-old daughter. She had kept the promise, to Beck, to herself. To the Marine she barely knew, but had sworn to protect. The cost would come later, when the world discovered Angel 6 was alive, when every enemy started hunting, when the peaceful life ended for good. For now, 15 Marines would go home. And that was enough. That had to be enough. The debriefings lasted 8 hours. 18 Marines in separate rooms telling the same impossible story in different words, each version shaped by what the teller had seen and heard and felt and could not explain. 2 intelligence officers per room. Recording equipment, classification warnings read aloud before every session began. The machinery of official narrative grinding reality into something the government could file and forget. In room 4, Sergeant Dalton Graves sat across from 2 officers who looked like they had never stood in the places they spent their careers analyzing. Clean uniforms, soft hands. The particular confidence of men who believed PowerPoint presentations were an adequate substitute for standing in a fighting position at -24 degrees while the world tried to kill you. Walk us through the engagement again, Sergeant. Graves had told it 4 times. He told it a 5th. The same details in the same order with the same measured voice of a man who understood that consistency was its own kind of armor. The ambush, the overwhelming numbers, the impossible shots that came from nowhere and everywhere and saved them all. You never saw the shooter. No, sir. Storm was too severe. Visibility maybe 30 feet on the best moment. Couldn't see my own hand if I held it past arm's length. Never heard muzzle reports wind and snow, sir. You couldn't hear a tank firing at 50 meters in those conditions. But I heard the impacts, heard the enemy dying, heard their command structure collapsing one body at a time. And Nurse Calloway. She was in the medical bunker during the entire engagement. Graves hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough for trained interrogators to notice the way a shark notices blood in clean water. She was supposed to be. Captain's orders were explicit. Stay in the bunker. Hide. Don't become a liability. He thought about the jacket. The creek water ice frozen into fabric in patterns he recognized because he had grown up in these mountains and knew what submersion looked like on clothing. He thought about the way she had been positioned when he found her. Against the bunker entrance. Legs arranged at that specific angle that showed the limp. Too deliberate. Too staged. But I found her outside, he continued. Severe hypothermia. She said she got disoriented trying to help someone. Fell in the creek. You believe that story? Sergeant Graves met their eyes. Made a choice that would define how he answered questions about Montana for the rest of his life. I believe she's a nurse who saved Corporal Pace's life with surgery that trained surgeons in equipped operating rooms would have struggled to replicate. I believe she nearly died from exposure. I believe she's the reason Pace is alive to go home to his family. What else matters beyond that? You're aware there are rumors circulating among the unit about the identity of the shooter. These particular rumors reference Angel 6, the legendary sniper who supposedly died in a training accident in 2021. Buried at Arlington. Graves laughed. Genuine amusement born from the absurdity of being asked to confirm something he had chosen to leave unconfirmed. Angel 6 died years ago, sir. I saw the memorial coverage on base news. Watched the 21 gun salute. She's buried in Arlington. Headstone and everything. Humor us if Angel 6 were alive. If she were on that mountain. Could Nurse Calloway be her? Calloway can barely walk, sir. I watched Angel 6 run a combat obstacle course in Iraq years ago when our units crossed paths. She set the base record that still stands as far as I know. They're not the same person. Not even close. Thank you, Sergeant. You're dismissed. This conversation is classified top secret. Discuss it with no one. Violation will result in court-martial. Crystal clear, sir. Graves stood, started to leave, paused at the door. Sir, whoever that shooter was, whatever classified asset saved us. They saved 18 Marines. Maybe show some gratitude instead of suspicion. Maybe let sleeping dogs lie if they want to sleep. He left before they could respond. In room 7, Captain Landry Mercer told his version. Professional, detailed, missing nothing except the understanding that would make all of it make sense. I accepted that someone saved my Marines. Someone with capabilities beyond standard infantry. Beyond anything I've encountered in 15 years of combat operations across 3 theaters. Whether that someone is Delta Force SEAL Team 6 CIA Special Activities or some special access program I lack clearance for, is neither my concern nor my business. But you have suspicions. I think she's not just a nurse. But here's what I know with certainty. 12 enemy command elements were eliminated in conditions that grounded aircraft and reduced visibility to near zero. My Marines survived an engagement they should have lost 4-1. If Calloway had anything to do with that, if she contributed in any way, then I owe her. We all owe her. And I protect people I owe. That's how I was raised and how I lead. In room 12, Private Corbin Marsh sat across from a single officer. Younger than the others. Less experienced at the particular art of extracting truth from people trained to guard it. You named your daughter after the nurse. My daughter was born before Montana, sir. January 2nd. Named her Marin Elizabeth Marsh. My wife chose the name from a book she was reading. Did you see Nurse Calloway during the engagement? No, sir. I was in my fighting position. Focused on targets in front of me and staying alive. But you have thoughts about the mystery shooter. I think someone impossible saved us. Someone who shoots better than physics should allow. Someone who kept a promise when keeping it meant losing everything they had built for themselves. He met the officer's eyes directly. And I think whoever they are, they deserve to be left alone. They deserve peace. They've earned it with interest. The official record was typed that night. Unknown sniper support, classified asset, above their security clearance. No further investigation warranted or authorized. General Thatcher Nolan signed it, sealed it, filed it in systems that required presidential clearance to access. But Marines remembered, and Marines talked, and slowly, carefully in barracks and bars and quiet conversations between men who trusted each other with their lives, a new legend started growing. About the night Angel 6 came back from the dead to save 18 men in a Montana blizzard. 3 days after Montana, a small room at Joint Base Lewis McChord. Table, 2 chairs, one-way mirror. Marin recognized the configuration immediately. Interrogation dressed up as conversation. General Thatcher Nolan entered alone. 60 years old. A face that had made decisions most people could not imagine. 12 confirmed eliminations, he said without preamble. Ranges from 610 to 920 meters. Conditions that grounded most aircraft. Visibility near zero. Temperature -24. Wind gusting above 25 knots. Enemy radio traffic identified you. Called you Angel. Said it was impossible. Said you were supposed to be dead. He leaned forward. I've read your file, Holden. All of it. The parts that require presidential clearance. 189 confirmed eliminations across 4 deployments. 6 years of service. Every decoration we can give. You were the best this country ever produced. Was. Past tense. That person died in 2021. Is she dead? Tonight suggests otherwise. Those shots in those conditions. No one else alive makes those shots. I was in the bunker. I didn't. Don't. His voice cut like a blade. Don't insult my intelligence or yours. I know what happened. The only question now is what we do about it. What do you want to do about it, sir? Reactivate you. Put you back in full operational service. Angel 6 is too valuable an asset to waste changing bandages in a civilian hospital. No. That's not a request, Staff Sergeant. Then it's a refusal, General. Sir. She met his eyes and said words she had been carrying since the day Beck died in her arms. I understand that I killed 189 people as Sarah Holden, and I've saved 340 lives in 3 years as Marin Calloway. I know which person I'd rather be. I know which legacy I'd rather leave behind when I'm actually dead instead of pretending. I gave you everything, sir. 6 years. 4 deployments. My legs. My identity. My life. I died so I could have peace. I am asking you to let me keep it. This is your last amnesty, Nolan said finally. Next time you activate that beacon. Next time circumstances force you to break cover. You're reactivated permanently. No choice, no debate. You understand? There won't be a next time, sir. You can't promise that. No one can. She stood, met his eyes at full height with no limp and no pretense and no apology. Yes, General. I can. Because I am done being Angel 6. That person is buried. Let her stay buried. He handed her an envelope. Read this when you're alone. Colonel Hale stepped in moments later carrying dry civilian clothes and medical discharge papers. You pulled it off. Nolan signing off on the cover story. Angel 6 was never there. Unknown sniper support? Classified. End of story. You're being transferred. Richmond, Virginia. Civilian hospital. Emergency department. Effective immediately. As she reached for the door, Hale stopped her. Sarah, those shots, the 920 counter-sniper elimination after 90 seconds submerged in ice water. That was the best I've ever seen. Better than anything you did before Syria. Better than anyone has ever done. The question is why? She thought about it. Because I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. Not competing, not collecting numbers. I'm just trying to save people. No ego, just purpose. Maybe that's what makes the difference. Shooting to protect instead of shooting to impress. Killing because it's necessary instead of because you can. Hale smiled. Sad and genuine and proud. I trained you to be a weapon. the best weapon we ever made. But I'm prouder that you became something more. I'm still what you made me, Wyatt. I'll always be what you made me. I just choose to use it differently now. She was walking toward the transport vehicle when Mercer's voice found her in the corridor. Out of uniform, civilian clothes, looking older than he had in Montana. Calloway, I wanted to thank you personally. For Pace, for keeping him alive long enough for evacuation to matter. Just doing my job, sir. No, you did more than that. A lot more than anyone could reasonably expect from a nurse stationed in a bunker. I was in the bunker. Like ordered. I know what the report says. I signed it. But I also know impossible when I see it. And those shots were impossible, unless someone extraordinary made them. Someone who cared enough to risk everything. Someone I misjudged completely. I called them useless. Dead weight. Liability. And I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. He held her gaze with the intensity of a man delivering the most important words of his career. If I'm ever in the dark again. Bow. Bad odds. No hope. That's the person I want watching my back. The person I'd trust with my life and my Marines' lives without hesitation. I'll pass that along, she managed. If I ever meet someone like that. He extended his hand. She shook it. Take care of yourself, Calloway. The world needs good nurses. We don't have nearly enough of them. The world needs good officers too, Captain. Leaders who care about their people more than their careers. We don't have nearly enough of those either. She opened Nolan's envelope alone in her new apartment in Richmond. Small one-bedroom, quiet neighborhood, curtains drawn, doors locked. Staff Sergeant Holden. This letter serves as official acknowledgement of actions taken during the engagement designated Operation Frozen Angel. Your conduct resulted in the preservation of 18 United States Marine personnel and the complete rout of a hostile force. This action would normally result in commendations up to and including the Medal of Honor. However, given the classified nature of your status and identity, no official recognition can be provided. Know that your service is noted, appreciated, and will never be forgotten by those who know the truth. You have fulfilled your obligation to this nation beyond any reasonable expectation. Your request for permanent separation is approved. Effective immediately. Angel 6 is honorably retired. You are free to live as Marin Calloway without further obligation. This nation thanks you for your service. You have earned your peace. Use it well. General Thatcher Nolan, SSOCOM. She read it 3 times, then burned it in the kitchen sink, watched the paper curl and blacken, and turn to ash. No medal, no ceremony, no recognition beyond words on paper that no longer existed. Just freedom. Just peace. She started work at Richmond Memorial Hospital 2 days later. Emergency department. Night shift. The particular chaos of urban trauma where every shift brought new variations of human fragility. Car accidents, gunshot wounds, heart attacks, overdoses. The endless parade of ways people broke and bled and needed someone steady enough to hold them together while their bodies tried to come apart. She was exceptional at it. Her hands absolutely steady. Her judgment sound under pressure. Her ability to triage and prioritize honed by battlefield medicine where choices meant life or death without appeals or second chances. She saved lives. A car accident victim with internal bleeding who would have died during transport. An overdose patient whose heart had stopped for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. A shooting victim with a severed femoral artery who had maybe 2 minutes before exsanguination and got treatment in 90 seconds because Marin had seen that exact injury in Raqqa and knew exactly where to clamp without looking. Each one a small victory against death. Each one proof that she was more than a weapon. At home, she lived quietly. No social media, no dating, no connections that could be exploited by people hunting a ghost who refused to stay dead. A single photograph on the refrigerator. Corbin Marsh holding his daughter at 3 months old. The only personal item in the apartment. The only proof that Montana had been real. 8 months after Montana. Friday night. The emergency room unusually quiet. Marin was restocking trauma supplies when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Calloway. It's Graves. Sergeant Dalton Graves. From Montana. His voice was strained, pain underneath professional control. I need help, medical help. Can't go to a hospital. Can't explain why. But I remembered you. Remembered what you did for Pace. Every instinct screamed trap. But his pain sounded real. And Marines took care of Marines. Always. She found Graves in a warehouse on the wrong side of Richmond. Gunshot wound to the abdomen. 2 other men with him also shot. Some kind of classified operation gone wrong. She went to work. No questions. Just medicine. Extracted bullets. Repaired tissue damage. Saved 3 men who could not afford to be saved through any official channel. You're not just a nurse, Graves said quietly while she sutured his abdomen. Montana. Those shots. That was you. I knew it the night I found you. The creek ice. The positioning. I've known since I pulled you out of that snow. Angel 6 died in 2021, she said carefully. I'm just a nurse who is very good at saving people who probably should be dead. That's all you need to know. That's all anyone needs to know. Fair enough. You're just a nurse. A damn good one who saved my life twice now. That kind of debt I take seriously. You ever need anything, you call me? No questions? No hesitation. Same as you. 10 months after Montana. Early morning. She was running in the park. No limp because no one was watching, and running felt like freedom. A car pulled up beside her. Black SUV, tinted windows. Sarah Holden. She kept running. Wrong person. We both know that's not true. My employer would like to meet you. The combined bounties total 10 million now. Chechens raised theirs after Montana. Iranians added more. Lots of people looking. She stopped running, turned, faced him directly. Let him see something in her eyes that had nothing to do with nursing. Tell your employer I am retired. Permanently. Everyone has a price, Ms. Holden. Mine is being left alone. Drive away while you still can. She stepped closer to the car, close enough to see his pupils dilate. If someone comes for that bounty, they will die trying to collect it. I am retired, not dead. Not soft. Not diminished. There is a difference between choosing peace and being incapable of violence. I choose peace, but I am very, very good at violence when peace is not an option. Tell everyone who is looking. Angel 6 wants to be left alone. Anyone who can't respect that choice will learn why she earned the name. The SUV pulled away. Marin resumed running as if nothing had happened. That night, she went to the storage unit. The Macmillan TAC-50 lay inside, wrapped in treated cloth. Disassembled, waiting with the patience of well-maintained steel. She looked at it for a long time, at the pieces of her past, at the weapon that had turned her from a Montana girl into a legend, and then into a ghost. She closed the unit, locked it, walked away without touching anything. 1 year after Montana, the envelope arrived on a Tuesday. No return address. Postmarked Montana. Inside, a photograph. Corbin Marsh holding his daughter. Both smiling. The girl standing on her own feet for what appeared to be the first time. Behind them, Montana mountains and clean sky, and a world that looked like it might be worth the trouble of defending after all. A note in careful handwriting, Marin Elizabeth Marsh. 1 year old, healthy and loved beyond measure. You kept your promise to a Marine you barely knew. We will keep ours to you. Your secret is safe, always. Thank you for giving me my future. Thank you for being the angel who saved her daddy, the Marsh family. She put the photograph on the refrigerator next to the old one. That same evening, her phone buzzed. Thank you for my life, for my Marines, for keeping promises when it cost you everything. You will always be a hero to those who know, even if the world never does. Captain Landry Mercer. She typed carefully. Just doing what anyone would do. Take care of your Marines, Captain. They are worth protecting. His response came immediately. Not anyone. Someone extraordinary. If you ever need anything, anytime, any place, any reason, you call. We remember. We honor debts. Always. She put the phone down. Looked around the apartment. At the small life she had built. At the photographs on the refrigerator. At the medical textbooks on the shelf. At the quiet, ordinary existence she had fought harder for than any battle. This was enough. This small life, these quiet victories, this peaceful existence where the most dangerous thing she faced was a Friday night trauma surge, and the most important decisions she made were measured in milligrams and minutes rather than meters and eliminations. Sarah Holden had been a weapon, necessary for a time, effective beyond measure, but incomplete. A tool pointed at targets by people who understood geopolitics but never pulled triggers themselves. Marin Calloway was a healer, imperfect, limited by physics and resources and the number of hours in a shift, but whole, complete, human in ways that Angel 6 had never been allowed to be. She turned off the lights, went to bed. Tomorrow would bring another shift. More lives to save, more chances to balance the ledger. 189 taken, then 12 more on a frozen mountain. 340 saved. Healing was winning, and in the bedside drawer beneath a paperback novel and a penlight, and the ordinary debris of an ordinary life, lay a single key to a storage unit across town, where a rifle waited with the patience of something that understood time better than the people who measured it. The angel was sleeping, but the key was still there. It was always there.